This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
A chilly morning at Pensacola's Bayview Park. These walkers aren't just out for a casual stroll, however. Their goal, to raise awareness about a disease that's becoming more prevalent, diabetes. Good evening, I'm Lloyd Patterson. Welcome to CTC, Connecting the Community. Diabetes is a sneaky disease. We know about 7 to 8% of the population has it here nationally and in Florida. But there are millions of people who have diabetes and they don't know about it. They think about 5.7 million. And get this, pre-diabetes, 57 million Americans in danger of developing it. They diagnose about 1.5 million new cases every year. Now, tonight we want to talk about the symptoms, what it means to have diabetes today, and what is at risk. Our panel of experts with us tonight, we have a good lineup. We have Nina Clark is on your right there. She's the Director of Education for West Florida Hospital, certified diabetes educator, nurse, 15 years in the diabetes field, chairs the Diabetes Advisory Committee for the American Diabetes Association in the area, and also serves on a statewide committee. And also with us, Cynthia Lightchuck, and she is a diabetes educator with Sacred Heart Hospital. She has many years in the nursing field, about 8 years in the education department, and they have a lot of things that we want to talk about sitting in front of them. Also with us tonight, we have Dr. Ziad Mamish, endocrinologist at Sacred Heart Hospital. I don't think I need to point out which one he is. And alongside him, Joel Sampson was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 14, and his 17-year-old daughter, Skylar, with him now, also has type 1. He is active in the Diabetes Association and is also the operations manager of Clear Channel Radio in Pensacola. So obviously life has gone on for both of them, and Skylar has played volleyball at Washington High School in Pensacola. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Haven't done the subject of diabetes, but it sounds like it's something that really needs a lot of attention. So many millions of people at risk. Joel, Skylar, let's go to you first because you actually have it. You have the more unusual kind though, right?
Yeah, it used to be called juvenile diabetes, but now referred to as type 1 diabetes. About 15% of diabetics have that. That usually affects younger age people, whereas the type 2 is often a result of lifestyle habits. Older people in life usually develop that. And really trends as they continue, if they continue, today, 1 out of every 3 children born today will develop some type of diabetes before the end of their life. So it is becoming more prevalent, not only type 1, but also type 2.
That's a real shocker. Before I go to you, Skylar, let me take a look at the type 1 diabetes symptoms, because people ought to know about this. Even though type 1 isn't all that unusual or isn't all that common as type 2, it's still worth knowing about. Type 1 symptoms: frequent urination, unusual thirst, extreme hunger, and unusual weight loss. Those are just a few of them. Also, extreme fatigue and irritability. Skylar, that ties right into what you experienced, right?
Yes, sir.
What happened?
In 1999, when I was 6 years old, I was spending the night at a friend's house, and this had happened around, like it had happened before in the past week, but I felt it really that weekend. We went to the beach, I was feeling a lot of fatigue, like you said. I wasn't feeling all my energy like I should. I was taking in a lot of liquids, like anything I could get a hold of, water, orange juice, soda, and I felt so exhausted by the end of the day, all the energy I exerted. But basically, my friend's parents told my parents about how strange my behavior was and how tired I seemed and how much I was drinking. And my dad, knowing the symptoms of a type 1 diabetic, automatically assumed. And we tested my blood sugar, and I was about at 588 was my blood sugar.
When it should be about
around 100, between 70 and 100.
Okay, so here we have a classic case. Father-daughter type 1, right?
True. This is, like you said, the uncommon type of diabetes. It's not really uncommon, but it's less common than type 2 diabetes. And unfortunately, Skylar, came up with diabetes, and her symptoms were typical, but still some type 1 diabetics, upon presentation, will present with acidosis, and they end up in the emergency room because type 1 diabetes is about total failure of the beta cells of the pancreas that produce the insulin hormone that normalize the blood sugar. So Skylar was lucky, actually, that her dad was aware of the symptoms and signs, and he immediately did something. But unfortunately, many children will end up in the emergency room with ketoacidosis.
So that's how you frequently get introduced to your future students in your diabetes programs, is that they came through the emergency room. Parents had no idea that their child was sick.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, but let's talk a little bit about type 2, and I don't want to forget about your kind at all by any means. We don't want to short you, but the type 2 symptoms, let's take a look at those right now, because that's what we're really going to focus in on tonight, and that includes any of the type 1 symptoms. It also includes frequent infections, blurred vision, cuts and bruises that heal very slowly, numbness and tingles in the hands and feet, and recurring infections in the skin, the gums, the bladder. That's the type of thing that you have to watch out for. Now, you could have one or two of those things, and is it something you better get to your doctor quickly about? Nina?
Well, one of the things that we encourage is that individuals that are older, and usually individuals are over the age of 40 that potentially would develop type 2, have an annual screening. And during the month of November, since this is diabetes month, we encourage individuals to get screened, and all they have to do is have a blood sugar test. But yes, if you present with some of those symptoms, and then as part of your annual checkups, we encourage individuals to be checked for diabetes.
Don't most people that go in for an annual physical, if they do go in for an annual physical, isn't this something that's routinely screened? Is it, or is it not something that it's automatically checked?
I would say yes, a fasting blood sugar is routinely done, but oftentimes a fasting blood sugar will be normal, and it may be the 2-hour postprandial is what we call it, the one that rises after you eat a nice big meal. That rises, and we don't really catch that one. So you may be pre-diabetic, as Dr. Mamisha was mentioning earlier, and not know it. All those people that you were talking about who haven't been diagnosed yet, they would be the ones whose blood sugars are rising after a large meal, but normalizing over time. And so
how can we know that? That's fairly specific. We know that there are 18 million diagnosed cases, and then about 5.5 million undiagnosed cases. How can you know that if they're undiagnosed, how do you know that they have that?
That's the big problem with type 2 diabetes, is that we also call it the silent killer. The 50 million or so undiagnosed diabetics that don't even know they have diabetes, unfortunately, the blood sugar can go up to the 200 levels, and so many people are still able to function, go to work, work out a little bit. They're a little bit fatigued, but unfortunately the blood sugar problem can last for 2, 5, 10 years sometimes, undiagnosed, till they reach a point where it starts going higher, and that's when they come up with symptoms of blurred vision. Very, very different from type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes involves insulin deficiency, so the person will go to the doctor within 1, 2, 3 weeks at the most. And without insulin, it's incompatible with life. Type 2 diabetes, the problem is very, very different. The problem in type 2 diabetes is not lack of insulin. It's improper insulin utilization. So they still have insulin, but they're not able to utilize it the right way. And that involves actually problem with metabolism of fats, proteins, carbohydrates. So like I said, the damage could be going on very, very gradually. And unfortunately, by the time they're diagnosed, 75% of people with type 2 diabetes already have a complication, such as eye disease, kidney disease, peripheral vascular disease. And that's why we always say, if you are at risk for type 2 diabetes, if you have a strong family history of type 2 diabetes, and we can talk about all the other risk factors, like Cynthia mentioned, they have to be screened every year starting at age 40 so that we could detect people with prediabetes and we can put them on the right treatment, change their lifestyle, and hopefully we will prevent it.
So you're saying that the way it is now, most people with type 2, they don't come in and say, I've got type 2 diabetes. They've got vision problems, they've got circulation problems, and they don't know that they're diabetic, right?
By that time they have vision problem, circulation problem. They've been diabetic for 5 years and they didn't even know about it.
Why is it that people with diabetes have circulation problems? Why do they have vision problems? What is it about it that gives them that, makes it a problem?
It's a combination of things. Peripheral vascular disease or circulation problem is a combination of high blood sugar, high cholesterol, low HDL, which is the good cholesterol, tobacco.
Tobacco plays a...
Of course. The biggest...
You sure you're not just throwing that in there because you're a doctor? You don't want people to...
Yes, absolutely. It's the biggest enemy to the peripheral vascular circulation. Okay. Actually, in type 2 diabetes, we always tell the patient the only reversible factor in peripheral vascular disease is that if they stop smoking. So tobacco is one of the biggest players in contributing to peripheral vascular disease in people with type 2 diabetes. Also, high triglyceride, high blood pressure, all of these things constitute what we call the metabolic syndrome that lead to all complications. Blood sugar elevation is just one of them.
Isn't it amazing, though, to think, and Joel, Schuyler, any of you can comment on this, to have 50 to 60 million people in the United States. We only have 300 million or so people in America, don't we? So that's a fairly high percentage of the people who would be in the condition which you call pre-diabetic, and within a certain number of years, how many years are they going to see complications?
I think Dr. Mamish said it best, that it is the silent killer, the fact that you don't aware that this is going on in your body. You have no awareness of that until a complication comes along. That's why screening is so important. That's why it may have to be you to be proactive at your doctor's appointment and say, can I test my blood sugar? My meter takes 5 seconds to give me a reading from a drop of blood what my blood sugar is. That's a good initial test to tell you where you're standing at. Many people are not aware that it's not just for older people. We're seeing more kids in their upper teens, more in their 20s develop type 2. That is a little lifestyle based. People are becoming a little less active. Eating habits have changed over the years too. So it's not just an older person's disease, type 2. We're seeing in a lot younger ages too. Okay,
we have pharmaceuticals for just about every condition in this country. You mean you can't take a pill for type 2 diabetes and get it controlled that way?
Oh, yes, you can for a while. And initially, you would take medications maybe to suppress the glucose that's produced in your liver. And then they would add on. Then it would be medications to increase the insulin output from your pancreas. And then later medications to make your cells more receptive to the insulin that your body produces. And then now you're up to 3 medications. In type 1 diabetes, we already talked about, they have absolute insulin deficiency. So to fix that problem, you add insulin.
So their problem is in a way more fixable. it's
Yeah,
you know clearly what to do.
Sure, and the complications are similar too, because you're still talking about high blood sugar over a long period of time. With diabetics, I mean, you take insulin injections, you can wear an insulin pump, and really, not just the medication for type 2s, but the research in diabetes alone over the past several decades has been absolutely amazing. When I was diagnosed in 1980, the way you could find out where your blood sugar stood was by testing your urine content for sugar, which was like a mini lab experiment in your bathroom with test tubes and things fizzing and stuff like that. And then I went to a summer camp for diabetics 2 years later, and they had a glucometer. Of course, it was about this big, as things are when they first start technology. And that gave you an accurate reading of where your blood sugar stood right then, so you knew what you were doing, how your control was. But with type 1 and type 2, it's all about control. We talk about the step up of the medications type 2. Many times with type 2s, lifestyle changes can make a world of difference. Getting regular exercise, changing your eating habits, adding more whole grains to your diet. A lot of people think, well, I have diabetes, I have type 2, I'll take a pill, it'll get better. Well, then you're on another pill, then pretty soon, oftentimes, you're on insulin. So it's a combination of lifestyle changes and control and really working with your healthcare team.
But the problem is, I think, anyway, from what I see, is you look around us, our culture today, you see many people carrying quite a bit of extra baggage. And that is much easier to take a pill than it is to change your diet and get out and exercise. So how do you get people to do something, even though that their life is threatened by it? It's hard to get people to change, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How do you do it, Nina?
Absolutely. That's sometimes a very difficult question, to work with individuals for what we call behavior change. And a lot of what Cynthia and I do together is work on trying to negotiate and try to teach that individual what would be the benefits of trying to improve their health, and then say, you know, let's work together and let's try it. Let's try some of, you know, things that would work together to improve your health, and see small steps can result in big steps and can provide success over time. And so that's what we work with individuals.
And that's what these people you're seeing in the pictures now. This was from the Diabetes Awareness, the walk that was held here just recently. And you got to see people doing more of that.
Yeah,
that walking thing.
Yeah, that's our annual walk. That's our step out, our fight against diabetes. We actually have another event we started this past April. We'll have our second annual one coming up, and that is our bike ride for diabetes. And we had a great event the first year around. It is the Tour de Cure, is what it's known. It's the only one, I think the closest one is probably Jacksonville or Birmingham. And it's a beautiful, you can do a longer ride for the more trained riders. There's a family fun ride. It's a fundraiser as well too. And this past year, for our first year, we raised over $70,000 for the American Diabetes Association. And we expect next year to be even better. It's a beautiful bike ride down the newly opened Earl Bowden Way along the beach, through Gulf Breeze, 3 Mile Bridge into Pensacola. A lot of fun, great, get your coworkers together. And what we see is a lot of people with a family member, someone they know, or they themselves with diabetes, wanting to do something to help raise awareness and also raise money.
It's just about, with so many people affected today and about to be affected, it seems like every family in the country is going to be dealing with a member of their family, maybe an older member of their family, getting diabetes.
Unfortunately, we are facing an epidemic of obesity, and obesity will lead to type 2 diabetes, and you will see
automatically lead to it?
Absolutely, because we see actually a parallel rise in type 2 diabetes incidence as obesity. If I show you one of the pictures I have when I gave a presentation, type 2 is linked 100% to obesity. Of course, not every obese person is a type 2 diabetic, but most type 2 diabetics are obese because it just triggers the gene that they have, and it leads to premature development of the diabetes if they are at risk. So this obesity epidemic that we are dealing with, the unprecedented amount of calories available in every food, fast food, fat is cheap, it's available, it tastes good. It's much easier to get a very fatty meal than it is to get a good healthy meal. It's a problem at the school level, at the family level, I mean, honestly, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to be an incredible problem facing us in the very, very near future.
If you just joined us, you're watching Connecting the Community, CTC, here on WSRE Public Television. I'm Lloyd Patterson. Tonight we're talking about diabetics, type 1, type 2, and Dr. Mamish was just talking about how many people are in danger of getting it because people waste so much today. And before you reach for that triple cheeseburger, you might want to think about what Nina has with her. Show us what a meal should look like for someone who is eating healthy.
Well, what I brought tonight was some examples of teaching materials that we use to teach about food. And for example, this is the size of a serving of meat, and this is a hamburger, and basically a size that will fit into the palm of your hand is the size meat. This is an example of a potato, and this is the actual size recommended. And this
for men, for women, all ages, all sizes.
Well, this is the size of a potato that is 15 grams of carbohydrate. And one of the things that we do is work together with matching food to the medication, particularly insulin. And so it's important that an individual with diabetes understand and recognize the size of carbohydrates and the amount. So this is just an example. And usually when we talk about serving sizes, we think of serving sizes that we may get at a restaurant and not recognize that this is actually what the serving size is. And this is an example of an orange. And if you go to the grocery store, this is not the size orange that we do get and we buy. So many times part of the problem is that the serving size that we are served is so large that we get to think that that's the actual serving size that we should eat, but that's almost...
How did we get such a distorted picture of what a serving is? How do you suppose that happened?
Well, when you eat out, more is better. You know, restaurants want to be known for healthy portions and everything. And as Nina was showing these, it really kind of ties in with type 1s and type 2s for figuring out how many carbohydrates you're going to be taking in during that meal, and then matching up either your insulin injection or your insulin pump to dial up the right dosage to kind of act like your pancreas would, to secrete insulin to match up with the carbohydrates to turn that into energy. So there is a bit of a balancing act. Really, if someone is diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 in a family, it's a really great opportunity for everybody to learn as a family eating healthier lifestyles. And you know, people who are overweight at 45 just didn't get heavy at 40. Those eating habits started at the home. And so it's a chance for the family to learn what's the good stuff to eat, what's going to keep you in a good range of weights and avoid developing diabetes.
And that diabetic person is going to need the support of the family. And if everybody's sitting there eating a mountain of French fries and cheeseburgers, and he's sitting there with that, it may not work. Cynthia, you brought some testing equipment that's common for what is that?
Skylar was talking when she was first diagnosed, and her dad too, about the different meters that they use, or that they did use the meter.
They poke themselves and get a blood test.
What I brought today were just some meters that we had at the clinic, and they're made by different manufacturers, but they all do the same thing. And what they do is they test a blood sample that's that you get from your finger, or from the side of your arm, or from the palm of your hand. These were called alternate site tests, and you see what your blood sugar is, and then you see the response to exercise, you see the response to the food that you eat, you see the response to the medication that you take. It's really empowering to be able to, you know, eat a meal and then test your blood sugar an hour or 2 hours later and see where you are, see if you took the right amount of insulin, to be able to go on the Tour de Cure bike ride and know that at the end of my bike ride my blood sugar is okay, that I'm okay and I'm not going to go low.
So what this stuff has done is given freedom really to people with the type 1.
Definitely.
Because you can go about your life. And Skylar, you played sports.
Yes.
And do you just step aside and poke yourself every once in a while?
Every time before a game, I always make sure, like an hour before and about 5 or 10 minutes before I start exercising, that I'm at the right level I should be. Even It's about 70 to 120 is about a nice, good level for a non-diabetic. And I want to make sure I'm even a little over that, because once I start exerting energy, my blood sugar tends to drop a little bit more. So I try to find myself about at 170, 180. That way, if I do drop, I'll still be in the normal range.
Well, you've really gotten comfortable with this, haven't you? You do it year after year, and you could teach a class on it, I suppose.
Yeah, and one thing with the glucometers and the home testing, you know, years ago you would go see your primary care physician once a month, maybe once every 6 months. This really gives you the chance to know where you're at. That's why they gave you such stringent guidelines to only take this much insulin, only eat this much food, because we know that's going to match up. Now diabetics who teach themselves and get through educators, learn the information they need, can really control this on their own. They test before they eat, you know where your blood sugar is, you know how many carbohydrates you've eaten, you take the right amount of insulin, and you can pretty much stay in a good, safe range and really not eliminate, but lessen the chance of some of the complications.
All right. Years ago, people did talk about type 2 diabetes in children. It just about didn't happen, did it? But now you're seeing more cases of it, I believe, and we want to show you a graphic for the indications that can lead to type 2 diabetes developing in children. Overweight, inactive, a family history of diabetes, race. Apparently, diabetes does not hit all races the same. And what? Women more likely to have it than men, men more likely to have it than women.
Actually, that's about the same in the last reading. In type 2, men
Type
and women
2 probably the same. Maybe a slightly higher prediction for women than men, but about the same.
Okay, and racial breakdown more common among African Americans?
It's more common among Indians, Latinos, and African American.
Type 2.
50% of, let's say, a population of Pima Indians have diabetes. 1/3 of the Latino population has either impaired glucose tolerance or type 2 diabetes. And I would say a good 1/4 of the Afro-American population has type 2 diabetes.
So they need to be especially aware of what's going on in their lives.
So for Afro-Americans, for example, and Latinos, that, like I just said, diabetes is a silent disease. But if I'm seeing a patient for a thyroid problem, and getting a history from the patient, he or she says, well, my father had diabetes, and I see that they have the characteristic of someone with type 2 diabetes, such as, you know, a little bit overweight, more on the abdomen, and they are in their late 30s, early 40s. That's the person that needs to be screened, because, again, I said it's silent. So I need to do a blood glucose fasting and a blood sugar 2 hours after their meal, or depending on their chemistry, maybe other testing, and that's the one that we need to catch so that we could do something long before they have a complication.
In the disease world, it seems like maybe cancer, heart disease get all the attention, but diabetes needs to be on the radar probably more than it is. And
oh, absolutely. It's the 4th leading cause of death in the United States, but I say actually it's one of the leading cause, because if you think cancer as the leading cause of, coronary artery disease and then cancer, diabetes is the #1 cause of coronary artery disease, and diabetes can put you at risk for many other cancers.
Okay, Dr. Mavish and our Sampson family, thank you for being with us and sharing your experience, and our diabetes educators from West Florida and Sacred Heart, thank you very much, and we'll come back and check on this topic again and see. I hope those statistics are wrong about the future, but we'll see. Thanks for watching Connecting Tonight. I'm Lloyd Patterson for WSRE Public Television. Good night.